This is part 3. You'll see a very heavily censored building structure with a lot of towers and zigzag and square formations. This has been heavily censored by NASA. This is video number 3. You'll see 3 towers here. The highest is 100 meters. They're white. You'll see the shadow. One very large tower, 100 meters, which is about 30 to 40 stories, shadow, and smaller ones around the edges. Again, no evidence of roads or any interconnecting. This is a lot clearer. NASA has attempted to blur it, but you can tell the tower structures, the zigzag walls, the shadows. This is a fairly large town in the canyon or crater. Very large ones there as well. So this is a bit easier to work out. It has been blurred, but you can tell the architecture and construction happening down there. So these were thriving communities with a lot of creatures happening here as well. We've got one large tower, buildings happening here which have been blurred. You'll see rectangular buildings, towers popping up all the way down there. Just one there, which is as well. I just saw something a bit to the right as I zoomed in. This is an area as well, which you see small towers, larger ones. This has been blurred. So once you learn the basic structure, it's easy to pick up the areas that have been blurred and what they should look like. It's only very small, so it hasn't been blurred much. You'll see the square excavation, rectangular structures, towers, that area there as well. You'll see the right angles around it. Literally everywhere the eye can go, you'll see a structure. Or there's a very large tower there. It's about 100 meters and squarish construction there, towers, rectangles, and that's been blurred as well. This looks like a group of towers there, and there, that's a very large group. They're about 240 meters, those ones there, so they're very big. This is a building with 3 parts coming out from this side. Just underneath you'll see some towers, heavily blurred by NASA and censored. This was a very large structure. You can see the towers coming out. Everything that's very heavily blurred. Rectangular structures, shadows, pathways cut into the rock. Buildings, pathways, tower there. Very heavily blurred. They were very tall towers and building formations. Around there as well. We're seeing towers about 80 meters high in this area. Blurred, very white, shadows. It's a whole town happening here with many towers. That's about 100 meters. Towers there, buildings towards the edge of the crater, these towers happening. Two towers there, towers, tower there, rectangular buildings, very blurred. Again, we've got evidence here as well, towers, rectangular buildings here as well. This area as well. Very eroded, so this will be very ancient structures. Very large towers, that's about 100 meters. Many towers and rectangular buildings nearby. Towers, rectangles. That was on the edge of a cliff face. This is an interesting area there as well. Obviously that's been blurred to hide what's there. There's about 4 or 5 towers happening here, about 100 meters tall. That's been blurred with shadows. Heavily blurred areas, so there's quite a fair bit of, you'll see rectangles, squares, towers. These areas as well, towers. Towers here, heavily blurred. There's one large tower there, 2 or 3 very, very tall ones. And just we stop, we see all the towers on the edge of the crater or canyon, which is very common with these alien structures. There's always on the edge a very large tower construction happening. This is a bit clearer, you'll see a lot more towers and buildings this area. Again, censored and blurred. That was a group of towers, that's been fairly blurred. Towers as well, buildings blurred. Evidence of buildings and towers there that have been blurred. That's a whole row of towers. So in this crater system of Tycho, T-Y-C-H-O, NASA has applied a fair proportion of censorship. This is a very large area here of evidence of an old city full of buildings and towers. Towers, that courtyard tower as well, shadow. This area as well. Now we'll jump to one other area called Mare, M-A-R-E, Moscoviensis, which is M-O-S C-O-V-I-E-N-S-E, Mare, Moscoviensis. So here we have evidence of, I'll just zoom into there, this is from Kaguya satellite in 2009. By just zooming in, it's a very large area, about 300 square kilometers. It contains hundreds of thousands of rod-like structures, mostly inside craters. So we'll now start zooming in, and this area has no evidence of any censorship, which makes it more intriguing. It will be so hard to censor the concentration that exists here. So we'll see large craters, and on the crater edges you'll see a very large rod, horizontal. We'll just use the large ones are about 240, so that's about 240 meters, or a quarter of a kilometer. Now these other structures could be towers that are pointing upwards, so they just look like spheres. In this area here, this is an ancient lava flow, so there's a fair proportion of a very rich soil, and you'll see a green tint and vegetation tints coming up. That's an area as well. You'll see the structure. This is the heavy vegetation tint I was talking about. That is very dense and green. Again, we'll see the orbs happening here, or towers in the crater. We're about 2.5 kilometers height, but again, by zooming in, we can look at the very dense green area. We'll see areas of these white towers coming up very soon. And here we have very familiar craters with towers on the edges. They're very bright and like square excavation around the towers. And these are generally, these ones here are about 100 meters, which is about 30-40 stories, so they're very large. And there's two towers there in the crater, and you'll see the whole landscape spotted with towers and courtyards which seem to be cut into the landscape. Just zoom into this area here, and you'll see intense activity happening where you see squares, walkways. There's two towers there. Down the crater gets very green, lush. I assume the green is a vegetation. Tower there, that's like a square excavation near the tower. We've got a tower happening here, shadow, and some bright luminous areas around the wall. So that's a common architecture feature here on this area. Again, we see rods happening. These are very bright and white. We have a cluster here in this area of the crater. It's about 4 or 5. Courtyard seems to be cut into the landscape. That area there is square, and there's a large accumulation of rods there. And I'll just quickly flick through the images. There's many images. There's no evidence of any censorship happening here at all. So normally just past the 2-kilometer area where the satellite filter kicks in and you can't see anything below, this is where we can go right down to the ground level and see what's there. So again, this is a common type of thing happening. We'll see very bright rods coming out. We'll see excavation. We'll see green areas around it. See the rods, excavation, and lush green happening. There's a group of towers happening here. Towers all appear to be on the edges of the crater. There's some there. That tower would be about, they're all very bright and white, that's about 120 meters. And like a zigzag pattern happening here, shadows, walkways,